There's a soil so fertile that farmers have been digging it up, selling it by the truckload, and watching it slowly grow back on its own. It sits in patches across the Amazon basin in a place where the surrounding earth is so poor, so leached, so full of aluminium that most plants there simply refuse to grow. And yet these dark patches have stayed rich for 1,000, sometimes 2,000 years, long after the people who made them vanished. Scientists call it terra preta, which is Portuguese for black earth. And the single ingredient that makes it work is something you can bury in your own garden this weekend. Not fertilizer, not compost alone, not some product in a bag. Buried charcoal, what researchers today call biochar. I need to be honest with you before we go one step further because this topic attracts a lot of nonsense. You will hear people online say that one buried layer of biochar creates infinite soil, that it multiplies your harvest overnight, that some agricultural conspiracy hid it from you on purpose. None of that is true, and I will not tell it to you. What is true is quieter, older, and far more useful than any of those claims. So let me show you what the actual science says, where the ancient method came from, and exactly how you would build one of these layers yourself. By the end of this video, you will understand the method well enough to start it, and I will point you to the full step-by-step protocol I put together for the people who want the exact measurements. But first, the 3 real reasons the Amazon Black Earth still works after 2,000 years. The first reason is water. Ordinary charcoal, when it is made the right way, is riddled with millions of microscopic pores. Under a microscope, a single piece looks like a sponge carved out of stone, an entire hidden landscape of channels and chambers packed into something the size of your thumbnail. When you bury that into your garden bed, all of those tiny pores begin holding water that would otherwise drain straight through the soil and disappear below the reach of your roots within hours of the last rainfall. A large review of over 900 field measurements found that in sandy soils, the kind that dry out fastest, biochar raised the plant available water by around 25%. That is the difference between a bed that wilts and cracks 2 days after rain and one that stays cool and damp for a week, carrying your plants through the dry spells that used to kill them. The effect is strongest in light, sandy soils that drain fast, and gentler in heavy clay that already holds water. So the poorer your soil drains, the more a buried charcoal layer tends to give you back. Now, a quick note before we continue. Everything I am about to describe is a soil building method for your own garden, drawn from published agricultural research. It is not a get-rich scheme, and it is not magic. It is old knowledge, measured with modern instruments. If at any point you want the exact quantities, the layering depth, and the 30-day schedule written out, that is what the Sovereign Garden Code is for. And it is available through the link pinned in the top comment for $24 this week. I will mention it once more later. For now, back to the soil. The second reason the Black Earth works is nutrients, and this is where the numbers get genuinely surprising. Charcoal by itself is not food for plants. It holds almost no nitrogen worth mentioning. And if you were expecting it to work like a bag of feed, this is where the misunderstanding usually begins. What it does instead is act like a battery for nutrients that are already there. The technical name is cation exchange capacity, which is just a way of describing how tightly soil grips onto the positively charged nutrients plants need, things like potassium, calcium, and magnesium, instead of letting them slip away. Without that grip, every heavy rain becomes a small robbery, washing those nutrients down past the roots and out of reach, which is exactly why so many gardens seem to swallow fertilizer and stay hungry. A systematic review that pooled over 1,600 separate observations found that adding biochar to sandy soil raised available nitrogen by roughly 36%, phosphorus by 34%, and potassium by 15%. Those are not the wild numbers you see in advertisements. They are careful averages, pulled from dozens of real field trials across many countries and climates, which is exactly why they are worth trusting. And here is the part that matters most for anyone tired of buying fertilizer every season. That same body of research found nutrient leaching, the loss of fertilizer washing out of your soil, dropped by around 38%. Read that again, because it changes everything. You're not adding more. You're finally keeping what you already put in, season after season, instead of paying to replace what the rain keeps stealing. The third reason is life. Those same millions of pores that hold water also become shelter, a vast network of tiny caves, scaled perfectly to the organisms that do the real work underground. They give bacteria and fungi a protected place to live, a coral reef in miniature, safe from being crushed by the soil above or dried out by the sun, safe enough to build the colonies that a living garden depends on. A researcher at Cornell University named Johannes Lehmann, who is one of the most cited voices in this entire field, describes the charcoal structure as a secure habitat for the microscopic life that makes soil actually alive. His point is subtle but important. The charcoal does not add the life itself. It builds the housing, and the living soil moves in and multiplies, generation after generation, sheltered inside the carbon. And living soil is the whole game. The fungi thread themselves through the soil and extend the reach of every single root far beyond where it could grow on its own. The bacteria break open and unlock nutrients that no plant could ever reach unaided. This is why the ancient Amazonians did not just bury charcoal and walk away. They mixed it with the ordinary waste of daily life, fish bones, animal remains, broken pottery, kitchen scraps, and ash from their cooking fires, feeding the soil continuously with everything their settlements produced. The charcoal held it all in place, and the soil came alive and stayed alive for millennia. So how do you actually make this? Let me walk you through it plainly. It begins with the charcoal itself, and the method the ancients used has a name. It is called pyrolysis. That word sounds technical and intimidating, but it simply means burning wood slowly in a fire starved of oxygen, so that it chars and blackens instead of burning all the way down to gray ash. If wood burns completely in open air, you get a small pile of gray ash, and nearly all of the carbon that was locked inside it escapes upward into the atmosphere as smoke and gas. If you starve that fire of oxygen, the wood breaks down into black, porous, stable carbon that will sit in your soil for centuries. The ancient Amazonians did this with smoldering pits covered in earth. You can do a smaller, controlled version of the very same thing in a metal drum or a carefully dug pit, and the full protocol I mentioned walks through the safe step-by-step for that part, because fire, however useful, always deserves real respect. Here is the single most important thing to understand, and it is the mistake that ruins most first attempts. You must never bury fresh, raw charcoal straight into your growing bed. Fresh charcoal is completely empty. Think of it as a battery sitting at 0% charge, desperate to pull energy from wherever it can find it. If you put it in raw, it will actually pull nutrients out of your soil to fill itself, and your plants will suffer for the first season. This is exactly why so many people try biochar once, watch their plants turn pale and yellow within weeks, and give up entirely, convinced that the whole idea is a myth that does not work. The charcoal was doing precisely what it is supposed to do. It was just doing it to your plants instead of for them. The fix the ancients understood instinctively is called charging. Before it ever touches your bed, you soak the charcoal in something nutrient-rich. Compost tea, diluted manure, worm castings steeped in water, even urine heavily diluted with water, which sounds crude, but is a genuine and time-tested traditional method used by gardeners for generations. You let it sit and soak for a week or two, giving every one of those millions of microscopic pores the time it needs to fill up completely with dissolved nutrients and life. Now the battery is charged. Now, when you bury it, it holds and releases nutrients instead of stealing them. This one step, charging the charcoal before it ever goes into the ground, is the entire difference between a discouraging failure and a garden bed that quietly improves every single year you keep it. Skip it, and biochar looks useless. Do it, and the same handful of charcoal that would have starved your plants becomes the thing that feeds them through every season that follows. Once your charcoal is charged, the burying itself is simple. You work it into the top layer of your soil, roughly the depth of an outstretched hand mixed evenly through the bed, rather than left sitting in a single concentrated band where roots would struggle to reach it. A common starting ratio in the research is somewhere around 1 part charged charcoal to 10 parts soil by volume, though gardens vary and the exact figure is in the guide. And then, unlike almost every other thing you add to a garden, it does not wash away and it does not burn off. Remember what makes terra preta remarkable. Conservative estimates say most of that buried carbon is still there after a full century. Radiocarbon dating of the Amazon dark earths shows some of that charcoal has held its place in the ground for well over 1,000 years, still working, still holding water and nutrients long after the hands that buried it were gone. Let that sink in. You're not feeding your soil for a single season the way a bag of fertilizer does. You are rebuilding the underlying structure of that soil for a generation, and possibly far longer. Now I want to be careful and honest about the limits because you deserve that. Biochar is not a fertilizer replacement on its own. The charcoal is the sponge, not the water. It works precisely because it holds and protects the nutrients and the living organisms that you provide to it. Empty charcoal dropped into already poor soil with nothing to hold does very little at all, and it does not create soil from nothing. The Amazonians built their black earth over centuries, adding waste and life continuously. What you are doing with a charged layer is starting that exact same process deliberately and compressing the visible results down into a few seasons instead of waiting the few generations it took the ancients. There is one detail about terra preta that still genuinely amazes the researchers who study it. In parts of the Amazon, farmers have dug out this black earth to sell as potting soil, and over years the patches have slowly reformed on their own. The living, charcoal-rich soil appears to partly regenerate itself over the following years, slowly rebuilding what was removed, which is something almost no other farmed soil anywhere on Earth is known to do. That is not infinite soil, and I promised I would not lie to you. But it is the closest thing to self-renewing earth that agriculture has ever found. So let me bring this together, because the method is genuinely within your reach. You make charcoal by charring wood in a low oxygen fire, not burning it to ash. You charge that charcoal by soaking it in something nutrient-rich for a week or two, so it never steals from your plants. You work it into the top of your bed at roughly 1 part in 10, mixed through. And then you keep feeding the soil life the way the ancients did, with compost and organic matter, and the charcoal holds all of it in place for decades. That is the real ancient method, and there is nothing hidden about it. No conspiracy, no secret, no miracle in a bag. Just carbon, water, nutrients, and living organisms arranged the way a lost Amazonian civilization quietly worked out more than 2,000 years ago. I built the complete protocol with the exact fire method, the charging recipes by ingredient, the layering depth, and a 30-day schedule to get your first bed started into the Sovereign Garden Code. It is linked in the pinned comment at the top for $24 this week, and it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. So if it is not for you, you simply ask, and you keep every bonus regardless. But whether you ever open that guide or not, you now understand something most gardeners never will, and you can start this weekend with a shovel and a fire. If this way of thinking about soil, older, slower, and built to last, is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe to this channel, because that is exactly what we do here. I will see you in the next one.